Hey everybody, this is Sarah Spencer with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and this is a very special live episode of Know Your Dogs. I'm joined by our Georgia beat writer, Chip Towers. We've got the beautiful Mercedes-Benz Stadium right behind us. This is where Saturday's, I guess tomorrow's now, SEC championship between Georgia and LSU will take place. We are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube, and we are live on Instagram. Maybe we'll go live on MySpace. I don't know. Clearly our goal is how many platforms can we go live on at one time. Ask questions on any medium, and we will get back to you. Chip, my first question is for you as we get into this game. Georgia's a 17-point favorite against LSU in the SEC championship. That's a pretty big spread for a conference championship. I think maybe that might move Jayden Daniels as he's going to play, according to what Brian Kelly said yesterday. How do you feel about that 17-point spread?
Well, it's a big spread for a championship game, right? And
I don't expect that.
No, and I thought once we got word. I mean, I guess officially yesterday, Brian Kelly casually said that, oh yeah, he's going to play. Jayden Daniels. It was debated
he
pretty
snuck it in there.
mightily, yeah. That he was. He actually told the reporter. He said, "How are you doing? I understand you're a little under the weather first." So I like Brian Kelly. He's all right guy, certainly for what we do in the media. But Jayden Daniels is definitely going to play, and that's one of the reasons the line went up. I mean, we've known these two teams were going to play in the SEC championship game a couple of weeks ago, and the line I think started maybe at 13, something like that. I mean, Georgia seems like they've been a 2-touchdown favorite at least all year long. It's gone up from there. That obviously had to do with LSU losing to Texas A&M Saturday night in College Station, and
that's a bad Texas A&M team. That was their second conference win.
Not good, yeah. 4-win team coming into that game, and then secondly, Jayden Daniels. All of us who watched saw him injure his ankle late in that game, going for a 2-point conversion, and saw him hobble off. He did finish the game, and Brian Kelly said right away it's not the dreaded high ankle sprain like A.D. Mitchell, right? We see what happened with that. It's just a regular sprain. But anyway, he's going to be taped up. He's going to go in the game, and so I suspect that line will come down a little bit to reasonable. I don't know if it's even reasonable if it gets down to 14 points. That's crazy for a conference championship game.
How does it change the dynamic of Saturday's game if Jayden Daniels, I guess if he plays, we still don't know if he'll be full tilt because he's such a mobile guy, and a lot of times that, if I'm thinking of one of the first things a sprained ankle would take away, it's probably mobility. Maybe he'll stay in the pocket more. We'll just have to see. But if he is looking like himself, how does that change the game?
Well, not a ton really. And look, I don't think Jayden Daniels or Brian Kelly really knows exactly until he gets out there just how mobile he is. But as you alluded to, mobility is his game. That's what he does, and it's really incredible. I didn't really realize until we got deep into this matchup that LSU, as it is 122nd in sacks allowed. They have 2 freshman offensive tackles, so he better be mobile because he's getting pressure all the time. But that's actually, ironically, when he's at his best is when he's on the move. Makes all kinds of plays, out of the pocket, down the field with his legs. When you add it all up, Jayden Daniels accounts for 65% of LSU's offense. That's 5,206 yards. He accounts for more than 3,000 of it himself with either his legs or his arms. So it's a big deal that he's going to be ready to go in this game. Now, the other question is Garrett Nussmeier, his backup, who we haven't seen very much, played in 5 games this year. Is he part of the plan? Will they? I'm sure they had to get him ready more than usual for this game, but will he be part of the plan regardless? I don't know. I think they'll get everything they possibly can out of Jayden Daniels and do whatever they can to make him as comfortable as possible, right after the whistle blows.
Sticking with injuries, but pivoting to Georgia, it is crazy to think how little A.D. Mitchell, Georgia's #1 receiver, really, has played this season. He got in the game against Georgia Tech, but the ball was not snapped because Georgia was kind of trying to draw Tech offside. It didn't happen. But he was on the field briefly. So you would think he was out there, and Kirby Smart, it sounds like he's going to get in the game. Yeah. Now, Ladd McConkey has done an excellent job this season. He had 1 or 2 drops early, kind of seemed like that. He was in that shadow for a little bit. He had 1 muff. But honestly, if you think about it, Kirby Smart has even said Georgia's had to overuse Ladd McConkey
Yeah.
because of some injuries.
Yeah.
If you're Georgia, how eager are you to see A.D. Mitchell out there and contributing? Although, again, who knows exactly how he'll look percentage-wise.
Well, they're very eager to see. I think everybody's eager to see A.D. Mitchell, and I think this is another reason why Todd Monken, Georgia's offensive coordinator, is considered a Broyles Award finalist for best assistant coach in the country this year, because he is, Georgia's offense hadn't missed a beat.
Yep.
And that's pretty incredible when you think about it. This is the second year in a row that Georgia's X, they're split in. That's your primary receiver in any offense, 6'4", 190 pounds, hasn't played for most of it. In fact, he's had 6 snaps. And that's so funny. You talk about that scenario this past weekend. AD's on the field, and based on his reaction when Georgia didn't pull them off the sides, and they told him to come back off the field, and you see him, he looked like he was
frustrated.
He was legitimately upset. He wanted to snap.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
If I'm him, I'm like, I want to get in the game. I want something to actually happen.
It would have been his 7th snap of the year, so that's incredible to think of. But as you alluded to, you got Ladd McConkey, who plays in the slot and flanker, and occasionally out at the X. You've got Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, who's done a great job out there. You got Dylan Bell, the freshman, who is started 5 games in AD's absence. And then, you've got the tight ends and the backs and everything else. So this is not a deal breaker for Georgia, whether he plays or not, like it hasn't been all year.
Well, they've done okay all season long without him, but you'd rather have him.
And seeing how we've seen 6 snaps for him all year. So I don't think he's all of a sudden going to come out there and he's going to be A.D. Mitchell that we saw in the national championship game last year. He can't be. So I think you'll get whatever you can out of A.D. I feel very confident that you'll look for number 5. I think you'll see him in the game. And I think they'll run something for him. If for no other reason, then you got to have that guy moving forward as you go into the playoffs and the rest of the postseason.
Absolutely. They're definitely going to need him down this stretch. What kind of motivation does Georgia have in this game? And let me set this up for everybody. Going into this game, I think a lot of people think, okay, Georgia's number 1. Their playoff spot is so safe either way. Seeding is at stake, yes. But Georgia lost the SEC championship last year to Alabama, fell to number 3. They were just fine in the national championship. They ended up winning it all.
Worked out, didn't it?
It worked out for them just fine, I think they would say. But at the same time, this group of Georgia seniors, most of them, they've got a national championship. They don't have an SEC championship. They want to win the SEC. It's something that, especially for Kirby Smart, this is his 5th time taking Georgia to the SEC championship since taking over in 2016. They've only won it once.
That's right.
So I think for people who are saying, is Georgia really going to get up for this game? It's in their backyard. They still consider this their backyard. Georgia actually, this would be an awful look if Georgia loses this game.
Yeah, it'd be terrible. And I think I was talking to some colleagues about this earlier today, and I think one of the great attributes for Kirby Smart, and there's a lot of them, recruiting chief among them, because being able to replace all those guys.
He brings helicopter places. I mean, come on.
He's pretty good at all that. But I referred to him in this other conversation is the ultimate button pusher. Like whatever that button is that needs to be pushed for that particular week, whether it's Kent State or Samford or it's Auburn or Florida or Georgia Tech, he knows the button to push, and he has been hammering on that button. Georgia hadn't won an SEC championship. They've won 1 under Kirby Smart. It's been 5 years in 2017. They're 1-3 in SEC championship games under Kirby Smart. They want to improve that mark. And, while they did hoist the national championship trophy in Lucas Oil Stadium, they did not get to hoist the SEC trophy. And ultimately, look, that's what it's all about. When you're a conference member, it's about winning your conference, number 1. Have you seen that trophy in person?
The
SEC trophy.
No, I have not, actually.
It's big.
I've only seen it from a distance.
It's big.
Yeah.
It's heavy. You'll look at it this weekend. Go see if
I've seen the college football playoff one about a foot away.
Cylindrical, easy to handle. This thing is bulky.
It's top heavy, though. The college football playoff one is tricky.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that.
Okay, but
many have dropped it. They have.
I was not one of them, thankfully.
Yeah.
But okay, so the SEC one.
Yeah, so the SEC, it's a big, and my point on that is it's a big, bulky trophy.
We're going to give you the dimensions of the trophy, actually.
Later today, I will be getting into how much that thing weighs, how tall is it, But the point being is that's the ultimate prize, to be able to hold that up, on the stage with your colored confetti coming down.
Yeah.
Georgia had to sit aside and watch Alabama do that last year. So I think that's significant motivation. I think that's all the motivation they need. And who knows, subconsciously or whatever, it's all psychology. I mean, maybe deep down they will play a little looser or not play as tight as they need to, knowing that, now look, they could just stink it up and get blown out here by LSU, and the committee can do whatever they want to do. So I'm not going to say they're automatically in, but we saw it last year, and they were blown out by Alabama, a number 3 ranked Alabama. This would be a 14th ranked team. So you got to win it. You got to win it. Georgia wants to be perfect. That's what it's all about. But I guarantee you, Kirby's pushing a lot of buttons where it comes to you want to win the SEC. You want to be SEC champions regardless of what happens the rest of this season.
Let me read you guys some Stetson Bennett stats from the last 2 weeks combined. So this is not just one game, this is the last 2 weeks. 256 yards, 83 of that came on one pass play to Kenny McIntosh against Georgia Tech. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Yeah. He has not been very sharp the last couple games. That Kentucky game was so-so. That Georgia Tech game, we talked to Stetson Bennett after that game. He was not happy. Georgia had to settle for 3 field goals. Georgia Tech looked pretty good against Georgia, especially in that first half. I actually spoke to some SEC Nation people before we met here today, and Laura Rutledge, I asked her, what do you want to see from Stetson Bennett? And she actually said, keep it simple, kind of go back to that game management role that everybody hates that phrase. But if you look at it as just keeping it simple, hey, I can see both sides of that. What do you want to see from Stetson Bennett? What does Georgia need to see from Stetson Bennett in this game? Yeah,
well, I think primarily is no turnovers. That's the one equalizer. Now, look, we can go on forever about turnover margin. Georgia's lost turnover margin a lot this season, and they are, after all, ranked number 1 and undefeated. Last time we checked, they come in here with a -2 turnover margin overall. So it's not everything, but the one thing that'll equalize teams so quick, we saw it against Missouri, we saw it against Georgia Tech, we saw it against Kentucky, is turn the ball over.
Right.
You're giving away possessions, you're letting them stay in the game, you're giving them life. So I think that's the biggest charge for Stetson Bennett on Saturday, is don't turn the ball over. Now, the other side of Stetson, I've actually talked to a lot of people. We've wondered out loud. And listen, I'm not saying this is the case, but is Stetson hurt? I mean, and this happens a lot. Okay, it's a long season.
Yeah,
we're in week 14 right now. So in between preseason camp, what they do in themselves over the summer, all through the season, practice, and then games, you're throwing a lot.
He's banged up his shoulder a couple times.
He's had it popped out of socket in the Florida game a couple of years ago. So that's got to be an issue. I don't know if he's actually had any surgery on it or not since that happened, but he's definitely had PT, physical therapy, because of his shoulder. So I wonder sometimes he's had a little bit of accuracy issues here of late, just a little bit off, a little high, a little wide, a little low.
But my question to you is, are those issues coming from, is he trying to do a little bit too much and go for all the marbles?
Yeah, I think perhaps. I mean, because the other thing Kirby talks about a lot, this was something that you and I have talked about, was new to us, explosive play differential, right? So you remember him talking about this. He said, well, we're not as worried about turnover margin, we're more worried about explosive play differential.
Yeah.
And this was a new metric for me, and basically the bottom line is, Georgia counts explosive plays as a run of 12 yards or more, a pass of 15 or more. If you end up with 4 of those, more than your opponent, regardless of turnover margin, you're going to end up on the winning side of things. And that's played out for Georgia. Despite their turnover issues, they've beaten everybody they've played, and it's mostly been because they've made more explosive plays than they've given up. And so I think that's kind of part of Stetson Bennett's DNA. I mean, he wants to make a big play, and Todd Monken wants to make big play. They want explosive plays.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. You go back to last year's national championship, and Stetson Bennett, even the way he connected with A.D. Mitchell, some of those plays in that game, there's nothing wrong. I think if you were to take that completely away, then we'd be calling the offense boring. So sometimes you can't win. I think it's about striking a balance a little bit. One thing Stetson Bennett is going to have to deal with, and I think we're going to see a lot of his mobility, would be my guess in this game, And I also think we're going to see Georgia's offensive line stand strong against two of the best pass rushers in the SEC, Harold Perkins, linebacker, and then defensive end B.J. Ojulari. Harold Perkins has 8 sacks. He's third in the SEC single-handedly.
Yeah.
So these guys, yes, Georgia is back up at number 1 in scoring defense, 11.33 points per game. Georgia's got the better defense. Georgia's got the better team, I think. But LSU's pass rush and defense is nothing to scoff at.
No, not at all. This is going to be a really interesting game within the game to sort of monitor because, Harold Perkins Jr., unbelievable player. It's not a surprise. He's 5-star out of Cypress Lake, Texas. Chose LSU. He's originally from New Orleans, and he's just lightning fast, really fast. And so the game that really got everybody's attention, he had 4 sacks on the road against Arkansas. And you know who Arkansas's quarterback is, KJ Jefferson. I mean, he's a really mobile quarterback. They managed to get to him 4 times. And then you add on top of that Azeez Ojulari's little brother, BJ Ojulari. So there's not just one of them, there's 2 of them. And what they've gotten to do, especially late in the year, they're moving Harold Perkins all over the place. Sometimes he's a defensive back in kind of a nickel role. Sometimes he's at inside linebacker. Sometimes he's at outside linebacker. Usually he's always on the opposite side of the field that B.J. Ojulari is. So that's a problem. Now, the flip side of that, Georgia's been great between Stetson Bennett's mobility and the blocking acumen of Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon.
Broderick Jones is having a very good year.
He's having a very good year.
Yeah.
I just asked me about an NFL draft mock I saw the other, not these who are they mocks, the guy in the basement mock. It was a real deal mock, and he was a first rounder. So he's had a great, and look, these guys know that. They're playing for tape. They want to do great in this game. They're going to have to on Saturday. That'll be a big story behind the story in this game.
That's another good point is that, talking about motivation for Georgia in this game, actually Javon Bullard was asked about this, and he said, if anything, the energy is higher. You would think, again, maybe could Georgia have some letdown in this game? I don't know that I see that happening, but you bring up a good point that if you're Georgia players, of course it's about the team first, and you want to win a national championship in back-to-back years. That would be insane. You want to do what even last year's group couldn't do with 15 NFL draftees and win the SEC on your way to doing that. But also these guys individually, you don't want a terrible game at this place on film if you want to go to the next level.
Yeah, no, Kirby talked about it. There'll be, if you look on Saturday, there'll be NFL executives up one side, down the other of the field watching this game. And, I think we forget about that sometimes. We take it for granted. It's the SEC championship, and yes, there's a Big Ten, but how many games are there going to be this weekend? We got a couple of them tonight on Friday night, and then you got your lineup of games on Saturday, 10 games total, in the country. So all eyes are going to be on those games. Everybody's watching these games. Florida, they're back at home watching. Tennessee, they're back at home watching. Everybody's watching, and so it's a real proving ground when you get to this point in the season. There's only so many so many teams playing, and you're one of them, so you want to stand out when you do that.
Also, make sure you guys feel free to ask questions if you have anything for me and Chip. I've got the Instagram pulled up right now. I've got all of our other platforms pulled up too, which is why I'm looking at my phone so much, but I am paying attention, I promise. Okay, another person I talked to earlier today was Roman Harper with SEC Nation. He actually said Jayden Daniels-Johnson, linebacker, is better than Nakobe Dean. That's something that he said.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to compare the two, but what have you seen from Jayden Daniels-Johnson this year? Because I think a lot of the questions surrounding this Georgia team coming into this year were they've lost so many guys. How can they possibly have the same level of output and production? Yet here we are. The regular season's over, and there's still the repeat number 1 scoring defense in the nation, and Jayden Daniels-Johnson is a huge part of that.
No, he's a huge part of it, and part of it, I would put Smile Munden in that conversation as well.
Very good,
because the two of them together, last year it was Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Channing Tindall, and them as a group is what made them so powerful. Yeah. And I think that's what you got here. To some extent, the other guys, Ryan Davis and Tresman Marshall, who come in there, but mainly Smile Munden and Jayden Daniels-Johnson. Pop. Let's just call him Pop, because that's what everybody on the team calls him. He's Pop.
It's a lot easier. It's a hyphenated name, so we just go Pop.
So if you watch it, just watch. If you're bored, of just watching that, just focus on number 10 pre-snap in the game. I mean, it's crazy what he does, and he's very similar to Nakobe Dean. And at this point, people call Georgia RBU. They call it tight end U, but LBU is really
LBU.
If you look at the draft in recent years, going back to Roquan Smith, and then Nakobe Dean is a Buckus Award winner, Pop, Smile Munden. Those guys are carrying the torch. And I agree with you, Sarah. When I came into this year, I'm not going to sit here. I expected Georgia to be in this game, okay? But that was
they got there a little bit differently than you expected.
That's right. That was more of a condemnation of the East than it was of anything else.
Sure.
I thought Tennessee came out a lot better than they were, but I thought Georgia would drop one somewhere along the way. And the reason for that is just, gosh, they can't lose that amount of talent off the defense and just completely reset.
Right.
Well, what have they done? I mean, they averaged 10.2 points a game last year, 11.3 this year. So you've lost 1.2 points a game.
And you can argue that it's all relative because Alabama has regressed this year. They're not what they were last year. So it's all relative every year.
It is.
If you're number one each year, that's the point. It doesn't matter what number it is. Really.
I thought Georgia's offense would have to carry them this season, and they haven't had to. They've been there, and if anything, I think Georgia's offense has been a slight disappointment. Now, we talked about earlier A.D. Mitchell and some of the other issues that they've had to deal with.
Yep.
But generally, Georgia's defense has carried the day, I think.
Right.
And here's the most amazing stat there is. So when Georgia holds an opponent under 20 points, which is most of the time, right? I don't hold me to this because I'll verify this later. But their record since 2017 is 55-0. So if you want to look at a number to watch, hold LSU under 20 points. You can be pretty sure you're going to have a Georgia victory.
I got 2 more questions for you, and then we're going to wrap up real quick. Georgia's tight ends are so unique. And actually, Tim Tebow earlier today was talking about how, if you're an opposing coach, what do you even do with Darnell Washington? Do you treat him like basically on an offensive lineman, lining up? Like, do you kind of think, okay, he's going to line up wider and he might just leap over you, Like, it's such a unique situation to have 2 freak athletes. Like, the only guy who's going to beat Brock Bowers out there is really Brock Bowers, like if he's having that kind of game. But Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington have been so great for Georgia this year. How big could they be in this game for Georgia?
Well, it's huge because, I mean, that's a check mark in Georgia's column every single game they play.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the case again this year.
Oh, yeah.
And in this game, I mean, specifically because Brock Bowers, you have somebody that nobody can match up with at that position athletically. Then you have Darnell Washington. Nobody can match up with him physically at that position. The 2 of them being over there, it's kind of pick your poison. Yeah, I mean, it's Darnell Washington does get very busy as a blocker in the run game, but discount him at your own peril because as soon as you're convinced that he's going to be helping block those outside linebackers all day, he is the king of the chip. And I'm not talking about me, Chip. I'm talking about the chip
king
block.
Of Chip Towers.
I hope somebody's made a highlight tape out here on YouTube somewhere. Certainly,
we're live on YouTube, so somebody on YouTube.
Darnell Washington on the chip block. I mean, there has been a handful of times where all his job is just to slow up that defensive end just a minute and then pop outside.
I'm glad he didn't give that too much of that.
He knocks it. Yes. Oh, there goes Sarah.
The edge of the parking deck is right there.
He is so good at that. He'll knock guys down and then go out on his pattern. So, look, he's talk about that mock draft. That I looked at. Darnell's way high up on that one too.
That does really stand, just like George Pickens and a pancake block. That does really, that really stands out. It does. Time. Okay, one last one real quick.
All right.
Kenny McIntosh, the last couple games has started to look like, I think, exactly what Georgia needed him to look like.
Yeah.
It took him a little while to get going. I think some of that is just because of Georgia's rotation of backs. They're splitting carries between a lot of guys. But Kenny McIntosh is a very unique one among that group because he can catch out of the backfield.
Yeah.
You saw that against Georgia Tech. They really got him going. I mean, he's had great games this last kind of final third of the season. What does Georgia need from Kenny in this SEC championship against LSU.
Well, they need a big game out of him. I mean, it's just like we were talking about Jayden Daniels and how much of the offense that 65% he accounts for LSU. Kenny Mack doesn't account for that much because Georgia is their power on offense is in their diversity. However, Kenny Mack does it all, right? And, he came into this season, we all knew that, as kind of the backfield receiver specialist. We saw it in the opening game against Oregon, right here in this building. Unbelievable game, 119 yards receiving. But since then, we've watched him develop over the year between injuries to Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards and Branson Robinson. They've had to depend on him. And listen, he's been hurt all year. Every time I see him,
thigh bruise.
It's that right
and then
thigh.
his other thigh got bruised. It was a whole thing.
He's one of those guys. Everybody goes in low on him because he's a pretty big dude.
Yeah.
And so he takes it on that thigh all the time. But he's continued to play. But what we've seen during the season is him progress from being kind of that out of the backfield specialist to being a between the tackles guy who can give you those tough yards.
Oh, yeah.
And as we've seen from Georgia all year, that's really what they need at this point is those tough yards. Now what's happened? Kendall Milton's getting back. Branson Robinson's getting healthy again, and Dejon Edwards, he's the slightest of the guys,
right.
But he's a tough runner too. So they're going to need some tough inside yards in this game, and I think Kenny Mack will be there to give it to him.
Okay, Chip, thank you so much for joining me.
You're quite welcome.
Thanks to all of you for following along, whatever platform you were following along on. Follow along with us again tomorrow for the actual SEC championship between number 1 Georgia and number 14 LSU, and also go to agc.com for more of our coverage.